Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to Cambridge City Council's Licensing Committee meeting, including members here in the chamber, officers who are observing virtually, public speakers, and those members of the public who may be watching this on YouTube. My name is Councillor Macpherson. I'm the chair of this committee. Please can those in the council chamber note that everything on your desk, including laptop screens, can be broadcast at some point. If you're following Teams meetings here in the chamber on your laptop, please make sure the audio and the video and camera must be switched off. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so those in the chamber are requested to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up, and I'm sure everybody here already knows that. The fire alarm will not sound because we've already heard it, so we should be fine with that. If it does sound, then we'll all leave pretty swiftly. Follow me, you'll be quite safe. We'll do a roll call of councillors, I think, and if we could go from Naomi and round, that'd be lovely.
Councillor Bennett, present. Abbey Ward, Chair.
Councillor Levine, present.
Councillor Pagecroft, Queen Edith Ward.
Councillor Divkovich, Arbury Ward. Councillor Gilderdale, Market Ward.
Councillor Jerry Bird, East Chesterton Ward.
Councillor Carling, West Chesterton Ward.
Councillor Jocelyn Scott, West Chesterton.
Thank you, everyone, and the esteemed officers to my left and right.
Yvonne O'Donnell, Environmental Health Manager.
James Goddard, Committee Manager.
Chris Connor, Meeting Producer.
Thank you very much, everyone. The procedure committee will receive oral presentations, which will, in this case, just be, there's one substantive item actually on the agenda. So we have 5 items. We'll go from the top of that agenda, and that will be self-explanatory as we go along if everybody's happy with that. First of all, I'd like to welcome David for his first meeting here, and you're most welcome. And of course, all other councillors and visitors here this morning. Item number 1, apologies, please.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much. Any other apologies? I think other than that, we're all present and correct, aren't we? Declarations of interest are item 2. I will remind members that declarations can be made at any time. If not made right now, it's no problem. We can make them as we go along. Are there declarations of interest at this moment?
I'm a regular Panther Taxis customer.
So you noted. Thank you very much. And minutes of the previous meeting on pages 3 to 12. I'm trusting everybody has read those. Are we all agreed they are a correct record? Thank you very much, everyone. I will say, I'll check the item myself here. The bottom of page 9, licensing officer and I have already spoken about this. Where Councillor Scott made proposed to amend the officer's recommendation. The Environmental Health Manager should liaise with committee chair about which decisions should be taken by officers or councillors. We have conferred on this matter, and in actual fact, there hasn't been any occasion for Yvonne to actually contact me, but it has been actioned. Because you won't hear anything about it this meeting, doesn't mean to say it's not action. There just weren't any cases to refer to me. So hopefully that explains that. Okay, that takes us to questions. Gentlemen, it looks like the floor is yours. So if you'd like to go in the particular order, just announce your name. Yeah, well, why not? Let's go from yourself, and then we'll just announce each. And I believe you have 3 minutes speaking time, followed by a further 2 minutes for any supplementary. But I know you're well practiced and you know this. So over to you. Just announce your name first. That'd be great.
Hi, I'm Afsar Aslam.
Could I just say, did we want to advise the speaker online? We do know he's there, but in case he thought he was omitted.
Yeah, good point. Thank you.
So, Afsar Aslam, CCLT, Cambridge. So I'm going to go through some of the policies or some of the Data Protection Act. So the use of CCTV is instructive and its use is subject to data protection and human rights laws. Members of the public, drivers, the Surveillance Camera Commissioner, SCC, and the Information Commissioner Office, ICO, may all raise concerns about the impact of mandatory...
Sorry, can I just stop you there for a moment? I don't mean to be rude. Could you just speak up just a little bit more so that everyone can hear you? Thank you.
May all raise concerns about the impact of mandatory CCTV systems on privacy, and this has been a key issue for licensing authorities that have already mandated CCTV in taxis. The Surveillance Camera Commissioner has said legislative framework local authorities need to consider, including the Data Protection Act 2018, DPA, and the POFA 2012. Some authorities have implemented policies that require mandatory CCTV only when a vehicle is in use as a taxi, i.e. there's a switch off button, if you're using it as a private use. It is worth noting that the Information Commissioner has addressed this specific point in a recent blog, suggesting that a requirement for continuous recording when a vehicle is being used as a private capacity is likely to be unlawful and unfair. Where the ICO has been made aware of councils implementing this approach, they had advised that the requirement for continuous recording is likely to be disproportionate to the problem it is trying to address. Is there any evidence of statistics around crime involving taxis, not in Cambridgeshire, but in Cambridge Pacific, whereas attacks on passengers or attacks on drivers? The ICO has successfully challenged councils on policies which they feel have not been justified, such as in the case of Southampton case, which I don't know if you're all aware of, a robust assessment of necessity and risk through DPIA, and seeking legal advice could help avoid enforcement action by the ICO to the council. In addition, the SC code is clear that mandating CCTV as a licensing condition will need a strong justification. Data protection impact assessment have said if a vehicle is required with CCTV because your authority policy requires it, that means that the authority is the data controller. The council decides how and for what purpose that personal data is being captured on CCTV. This means that your authority is accountable under data protection legislation for processing the passenger and driver's personal data. So we'd like to know, if you know what is the crime rate for Cambridge. Also, some authorities have been have paid for the CCTV in vehicles. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Gentlemen, could I ask if your questions are on the same lines? If they are, then we'll hear them all and answer them at the end. If it's a different matter, then we'll take this one now. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Over to you then, sir.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Eddie Holland. I'm the CCLT, it's Cambridge City Licensed Taxis Vice Chair. And my biggest concern with this is cost. Now, everybody who is having this cost put on them is a private business. We've just had 2 years of lockdown. We're just trying to turn a corner now to get ourselves out of debt. And this is just something else that we don't really need at this time. But I understand that it is a good policy. It's a good thing to have it in the cars for everything that's put down in Yvonne's report. But this is being implemented on us at a time we don't really need it. We can't really afford it. And surely, if I'm going to buy something, I've got good title to that. Nobody can tell me how to use it, what to use it for, as long as I use it legally. But now I'm being told, oh, you've got to buy that, have it installed at your cost, but you can't touch it. This is what you've got to do with it, this is what you can't do with it. You've got no right to do that. There's no rights. I bought it, I've got the right. So what I would say is that, in my view, and many of you, the drivers I've spoken to, is that the council should fund this, and then they'd have good title, and then they could actually put down the guidelines that they've already done and have good title to it. But at the minute, if it goes through and we have to pay for it, there's nobody who can actually say to us, you will, only the police, you will let us have access to it. It's our property. And what's recorded on it, images, is our property. So I just asked the council just to rethink about it and actually come up with some funding for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Holland. Mr Taylor, is your question the same? Is your question along the same policy? Okay, thank you.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for having us. My name is Ahmed Kara Ahmed. I am the chairman of Cambridge City Licensed Taxis Limited. The taxi trade has been trying to recover from long-lasting COVID until now, with no profit. Next year will be another challenging year for our business. The following winter is expected to be a tough and unpredictable, with soaring energy bills, rising inflation, and risk of recession. It is a tough time to be running a business. This winter, people might be struggling to pay for their food, their mortgages, and their energy bills. I believe some of the taxi drivers will fall in this category too. Along with all these expected difficulties, Cambridge City Council is creating an extra expense to the taxi trade. The main question we have to ask ourselves: are these cameras really needed in Cambridge? Cambridge is known to be one of the safest cities around the UK. How many crimes have had in the past 5 years? According which data Cambridge City Council has made this decision? We are asked to install and pay for a CCTV camera which will have no access to it. Even when we use our vehicles for a private use, we will not be able to stop that camera. Our privacy and customers' privacy are at risk. We don't know how much it's going to cost us and have no financial support from the council. Many other councils, they implemented this policy, but they offered to pay for it. Taking into account all the hardship which is coming, I am kindly asking this committee to postpone the implementation of CCTV policy until further notice. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. We have a speaker online as well. Can you hear us? I'm not quite sure who that is.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, that's loud and clear now, and we can see you. Thank you very much. Is your question to do with the CCTV policy or something different?
No, yes, on the matter, yes, on this policy.
Okay, thank you very much. Then you may go ahead now then. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm a Hackney carriage wheelchair driver, so CCTV, in my view, CCTV is a very good solution for safety, to improve safety. However, we need to look at the bigger picture of the trade overall and what current situation we are in, the financial situation of many drivers. At the last taxi forum, Hackney Carriage Trade agreed we are losing drivers. And first drivers to go are wheelchair accessible wheelchair drivers, wheelchair vehicle drivers, because of the cost of the vehicle. It's much cheaper to move on to private hire and get much cheaper vehicle and pretty much doing the same job with much less cost. Sadly, I think if we bring the CCTV into our policy as a mandatory, I think more drivers will lose more drivers, basically, and that will affect more wheelchair users, because as we know, we already got a lot of complaints about this. So I think the April it's way too early to bring the CCTVs. We just basically, as a driver, I can't afford it. I can't afford it. and that will put question mark on this. Will I continue doing my job, or will I just move on and go to try to do something else? And we, Hackney Carriage operators, we are ready to meet Cambridge goals. But for this, we need to have a taxi department that is creative, open-minded, and works with us on the policy. We are ready to be Cambridge. Is the taxi department is ready to make us Cambridge? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, gentlemen. It was useful. I hope you didn't mind just doing it as rolling, then that way we've got continuity rather than playing ping pong with the answers. So can I ask the licensing officer to respond?
Thank you, Chair. So obviously we have introduced this policy to be in line with the Data Protection and the Information Commissioner's Office. We have done a lot of research and we have also spoken to the Information Commissioner's Office to ensure that we are not breaching any data protection or any information legislation. The City Council and the police will be the data controllers of this for reasons that the CCTV cannot be interfered with, and it will only form part of an investigation where we do receive a complaint. On the point of private use of a taxi is always a taxi. It should never be used for private use. So once you're a licensed taxi, then it will always remain a licensed taxi. Appreciate the cost to this, but we have been discussing this since 2017, and therefore our paramount is the safety of our customers and of our drivers. So we have to balance that between cost and the safety of the travelling public. I think that's all I've got to say, Chair.
Okay, gentlemen, you have space to 2 minutes each to ask a supplementary question, should you so wish, following that response.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne. So, with that in what we've just said, I know you're saying, okay, you've talked with other authorities, but other councils have paid for CCTV in taxis to help, or even sort of half fund it or partly fund it. I think Cambridge should be able to do that. You should be able to help drivers to fund it. I think what CCLT will be doing with that, we will be asking, trying, if it's not, if you all agree with what Yvonne said today, and you've sort of put in CCTV in taxis, then we will take it to court, and I think we will seek advice for that, because I think it's just too much of a cost for us. Also, we haven't had, from the last meeting, when it was postponed, you said, okay, we're going to go back, we're going to check the Data Protection Act, etc., and then we'll come back to you. Well, nothing's come back to us apart from, what you've said now about, bringing it back and voting. But, we haven't sat down, we haven't talked about what the crime rate was in Cambridge City, or anything like that at all. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Gentlemen,
Hi there.
Yeah.
Thanks for indulging us a bit more. Just to say that the whole crux of this comes down to nobody's saying it's a bad idea. Everybody thinks it's a good idea, but it's the cost and the financial implications on people like myself, small business owners, and the councils seem to go, oh, well, you can pay that. Yeah, you've got a business, you can pay that. But we can't keep paying and paying and paying. We've had to change our cars for silver cars. Green stripes, okay, it's tough and halfpenny. But again, another regulation. Now we're on CCTV. What next? But we never, ever get any funding from the council. It's always down to us. And there's got to come a stop to it. You can't just steamroller through like licensing like to do. That you will do this, you will do that. And by the way, you'll pay for that. But have a happy day. And you just can't go on, and you just don't seem to see it. Anyway, that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivan, for your report. I remember that in the last few Taxi Forum meetings, the taxi trade was promised that we are going to work together in this. And you were supposed to come to us with the data protection, with the cost, with the supplier who is going to pay for the maintenance, and etc. We never heard anything back from your side. Therefore, we have been consulting our solicitors in this matter. And according to the result of today's voting, we'll decide whether we have to take this further and take the matter to court. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And our speaker online?
No, I got nothing to say. Thank you. I said everything what I want to. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. At least you've had your opportunity. Response, Yvonne?
Just 2 points. The crime rates that you referred to are in Appendix A of the report. That was the information we received from the police and the information that we hold as part of the licensing authority. The second point is the CCTV is always an agenda item on the Taxi Trade Forum, which we do discuss each time we meet. So there has been open discussion at the Taxi Trade Forum. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you, gentlemen, for your questions and your time. So you can choose what you do next. So obviously, if you wish to leave, that's fine, but you're welcome to stay. Okay, that takes us to item 5 on page 13, which is the CCTV in Hackney carriage and private licence vehicles. The recommendations are on page 15 at 2.1 to 2.2, and I will ask the Environmental Health Manager to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. So in October 2017, the Licensing Committee agreed in principle to the introduction of mandatory CCTV in vehicles for the safe use of the vehicle, the safe use for passengers, and the safety of our taxi drivers. In September 2020, there was an agreement of an implementation date of the 1st of April 2022 for the introduction of CCTV. However, due to COVID, this date was pushed back. Also, in July 2020, statutory guidance were introduced requiring that there needed to be a justification to introduce CCTV, including the test of necessary to meet a pressing need and proportionality. So, in March 2022, Licensing Committee asked officers to go back and review the CCTV policy. This review was undertaken this year, and information was collated from our own information and data from the police, which is highlighted in Appendix A, and this showed that there was a clear justification for putting CCTV in licensed vehicles. Section 3.1.6 and 3.18 details further reasons why adequate justification was determined by officers. Cambridge City has been working with South Cambs on the policy specification as outlined in Appendix B. We've also been working on a pragmatic and staggered implementation plan whereby any new renewal or grant of a new licence will have to have CCTV installed as of the 1st of April 2023. This gives us a 6-month lead-in period. South Cambs policy, specification and timeframe, as outlined above, was agreed at their licensing committee last week. So we are working in line with South Cambs to implement this CCTV policy as a collective. Therefore, members are recommended to approve the implementation of CCTV in licensed vehicles in a phased and managed approach. Any grant of a new or renewal of existing from the 1st of April 23 must be fitted with CCTV as per the specification in Appendix B. Members are also recommended to approve a review of the CCTV policy every 5 years as outlined in the statutory guidance. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We open for debate. Any questions, members? Councillor Scott.
Thank you. Just on the, looking at the appendices, I was just wondering if we could have clarification on a number of aspects. In Table 2A, it's reported incidents where taxi driver is stated as occupation of the suspect. And for Cambridge City Council, it's 24, with incidents within the vehicle, 4 relating to the same incident. I just wanted to clarify on that one. When it says 24, that could be incidents that are unrelated to their role as a taxi driver. Is that correct? Or when it says 24, does it mean even though only 5 incidents took place within the vehicle, the other 19 were in the context of the driver's occupation as a taxi driver? That's one question. I also note, just in passing, that 6 of the incidents were kidnapping, which of course is a really serious offence. I'm not saying the others aren't, but that's particularly serious. Then if we turn to Table 3A, reported incidents where taxi driver is stated as the occupation of the victim, for Cambridge it's 39 reports and 13 within a vehicle. Does that mean that the 39, that the other, taking 13 away from 39, those, it's 26, isn't it, related to the occupation as a taxi driver, but that they didn't just happen in the taxi itself. They were in the context, I mean, of the person being a taxi driver. All that I'm getting at is that we need to know how many of these incidents, whether as victim or as alleged as suspect, actually relate to their role as a taxi driver, or if it just happens that it was a taxi driver who reported that they were burgled, for example. Thank you.
So this is a terminology from the police. So they use the word occupation of victim, occupation of suspect. If the taxi driver declared that they were a taxi driver, it would be marked down as occupation of suspect or occupation of victim. It doesn't necessarily mean that these incidents happened whilst as a taxi driver, but any incident where the taxi driver confirms to the police that it's an occupation of suspect or occupation of victim, under the Rehabilitation Act, the police have to report that through to the licensing authority.
But if I can add to that, I understand the police role. It doesn't make it easy for us, though, does it, in determining what the level of the possible potential criminal activity is, whether the taxi driver is the suspect or the victim, because I'm agreeing absolutely with the report that the inclusion of CCTV would be for the benefit of the passengers and also for the benefit of the taxi drivers. So it would be good to know, because one of our public speakers said that there's very little problem within Cambridge City. It would be really good if we did know how many of these notifications in the tables actually related to a taxi driver offending as a taxi driver, allegedly, a taxi driver as a victim of an offence in the role of taxi driver. But I understand the problem, that it's the way the police keep the statistics. Thank you.
I think it's probably also worth noting that in Table 1, which is the reports to us, those reports would be as a taxi driver. So they're the reports that we get complaining about the behaviour of a taxi driver. So just to put it into some context.
Eva, it's yours.
Thank you. I think I can stand to be corrected, but the dispute is less so about, obviously, the need for the cameras. I think, obviously, the Taxi Drivers Forum is more concerned about its implementation and the cost of it. So have we had a breakdown of the potential cost of subsidising the implementation of this policy and how many taxi drivers there are in Cambridge and whether there are any options available to be able to support the taxi drivers in Cambridge. Thank you.
Yeah, I absolutely understand the cost implications of this. If the council was to subsidise the cost of it, it would have to come out of the general fund, and it would have to be a budget bid if we were to subsidise this.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that's answered part of my question. I just noticed that cost is the main issue, appears to me to be the main issue. I'm just wondering whether the costs that are outlined on page 21, how have they been updated? How old are those costs? Electronics is not getting any cheaper. Thank you.
Those costs is as up to date as when the report was written, which was written in September. Obviously, we had to move the hearing. So this report was written in September. So these are the costs that we have come up with our colleagues in South Cambs. And they are an average.
Thank you, Chair. My question actually fits perfectly into this stage of the debate. So excellent chairing here. I'm looking at page 4, implications A, financial implications of the main report, where the installation costs mentioned by Councillor Levine are laid out. And I note that the larger the vehicle, the more cameras are needed and the more expensive it will be. I'm sorry if this sounds a very selfish question, but as a mobility scooter user, when I'm out in my mobility scooter or when it breaks down, I need one of the 4 very large vehicles to come and rescue me. I know we're down to only 4 in Cambridge, and it's a matter of concern to me and fellow mobility scooter users that there will be someone to pick us up. So particularly concerned about the larger vehicles, which may require up to 4 cameras and 2 to 3 audio buttons, which I assume from the figure we're looking about, £1,000 of expenditure. The financial sides, I don't know if this is feasible because I don't know if the council holds a consumer credit licence, but I did wonder whether a loan scheme might be possible, perhaps an interest-free loan over 12 months. I know that there is a black hole in the council finances. I spoke about this in this very chamber last Thursday. But we do have plenty of cash, and I do think we could afford a loan scheme.
As I said, any budgetary requirements would have to go through the normal budgetary process that we have as a council. I don't know the answer about a loan scheme, Councillor Bennett. I'd have to speak to our finance team on that.
Thanks. I just had a question about the phasing of it and whether there's a chance it could be phased in a longer duration to kind of mitigate the cost in a way. I remember at the last licensing it was mentioned that the CCTV is particularly needed or wanted for vehicles with tinted windows, and new cars often have tinted windows but they can't be used without CCTV. Is there something that could be said about putting CCTV in new vehicles with tinted windows, but having a slower phased approach and putting the CCTV in for the other vehicles that currently don't need CCTV urgently?
So this discussion has been going on since 2017 and it gets pushed back and pushed back. What we're trying to do is introduce a policy that's in line with South Cambs. As I said, South Cambs policy was agreed last week to implement it as of the 1st of April 2023. But again, that's a decision for this committee to decide on how they want us to, if they want us to implement a CCTV policy and the time frame around that.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm about to go back to the cost discussion. So on page 21, again, under financial implications, what concerns me is that the costs have been only really identified from one provider, and then we've got a sentence at the end saying a further 2 Cambridgeshire-based companies have quoted. Oh, sorry. Excuse me. Yeah, so we've got the one provider's estimates, but then at the end of the paragraph, we have a sentence saying a further 2 Cambridgeshire-based companies have quoted £500 per unit. When we're saying unit in that context, what is that referring to? Kind of each camera? Is that referring to a 2-camera unit with 2 panic buttons? Kind of what does unit mean in that context? And then sort of on top of that, I'm just interested to hear kind of if we have a good estimate of what almost the average cost would be for a standard vehicle, given we've kind of got all sorts of different varieties of vehicle. Do we have any kind of breakdown, any data on what most people would end up having to pay under this?
So a unit for £500, it would be two cameras with two panic buttons, and that would probably be sufficient in a saloon car. A wheelchair accessible car, you're probably looking at double that, because you need to get cameras to be able to do 180 degrees around the vehicle, so you've got full coverage. So yeah, that's what an average cost would be for a wheelchair accessible. We do have 150 wheelchair accessible vehicles. We've got 200 and so saloon vehicles on our fleet.
Very briefly, Chair, if I may. So thank you for clarifying that about the £500 cost. So then my subsidiary question is, we found further providers for that section. Have we also got a quote from those further providers for the lower coverage items, or have we only got this one company that we know is supplying things for 75, 100, 125? Because I know that there were procurement issues in the past, and that's one of the reasons we delayed this. I'm just cautious to kind of do something with a low cost, but there's only one provider that's actually providing it at that cost.
So what we've done is we've gone out to a number of providers, and we've had those 3 quotes that are highlighted in the report back. But the idea was that this is a specification. A driver can then go to whatever provider as long as the specification, the council specification, is met. So there is room for a bulk buy for drivers to get together and go to a company where they may provide a number of vehicles. So at the moment, we've had 3 quotes back.
Jerry? And then I've got Jennifer, and then I've got Eva again.
Thanks, Chair. Right, okay. Yeah, I know this has been going on a long time. If we think the other way, the safety for the passengers on the taxis and yourselves, you know, there is a worry. You've been robbed, you've been attacked. We know that. It's gone on for years. And then there's other issues with the actual passengers, with some drivers. So I think we should have this system working. I understand your problems with the cost of living, like everybody else has got. We as a council have got the problems with the budget, as we've said. So I do feel for you, but I also feel for the passengers and your safety. And I think that should be the most important thing at the moment to look at. The way things are, crime is going to go up. We know that because of people not having money and stuff. So that's my way of thinking, Chair.
Thank you for that. Jennifer?
Could I just ask if South Cambs are offering any monetary help towards their taxi drivers? And also, I think, didn't we, when the pandemic came on, didn't we give some sort of grant to the drivers for the screens? Is there no way we could actually implement this into this problem?
Don't believe South Cambs are offering any monetary solutions to this. And with the grant for the schemes, that was paid out of public health COVID money. So that wasn't City Council money, that was paying for the screens.
I just want to say that I think it's a little bit unfair to vote on kind of forcing taxi drivers to implement a policy which we can't, or we don't know the options regarding subsidising. So we're not really making a fully informed decision about all the options that are available. I also feel, obviously, public safety is the most important thing, but we can't force through a policy that's impractical. We also want a thriving taxi service, so I think it would be better to make an informed decision to see whether there are subsidising options available at all and what options there are, so that we can make a more informed decision as opposed to just kind of, in a way, blindly implementing this mandatory policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I believe one point, Yvonne, you said that a taxi is always a taxi. I was just wanting clarification on that. Does that mean that the owner of a taxi cannot use it privately to take his family on a trip? It just seems to me that that's quite an onerous condition to place on a taxi. Thank you.
The legislation states that once you're a licensed vehicle, you're always a licensed vehicle whilst that plate remains on that vehicle. What that does mean is it has to be driven by a licensed driver of the same local authority. It doesn't mean that they can't do their family shop or whatever, but it just means that it always needs to be driven by a licensed driver, and it is always a licensed vehicle, and that is what the law is stating. It's not a policy decision, that is what the law states.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering, could we adopt this policy in principle and then explore the possibilities in terms of the financial implications? What we all need to realise, ourselves as councillors, our taxi drivers and the industry that we truly support, but everybody out there, that we're in a position, this council, as every other local government authorities throughout the United Kingdom, of actually not having the funds to do the things we want to do that are absolutely essential to ensure that our residents do have the support and the services that they need. The money is simply not there. So in these circumstances, I think everybody in the chamber would support the principle of a need for proper care for the safety of the taxi drivers themselves and the passengers. But my question is this: are we aware of whether central government has got any focus at all on the issue of safety, particularly in relation to women, but not only in relation to women? And are they taking any action? For example, are they exploring the possibilities of ensuring that there is a proper safety policies generally, but that would encompass the taxi industry as well? I noted that in The Guardian this morning, what is being undertaken is a policy that apparently the police are implementing together, I understand it, with the Crown Prosecution Service to ensure that there's a better form of action of police in relation to the crime of rape. So to come back to my question, could we explore with central government the possibility that they should be taking responsibility for the safety of everyone within the United Kingdom, including the passengers of the taxi industry, to find out if there is any possibility of a subsidy from that direction rather than out of the very much depleted coffers of the Cambridge City Council? Thank you.
So just on your...
Could I come in on the same point before Yvonne answers? Sorry about interrupting. I was also thinking along the same lines as Councillor Scott, and particularly I was thinking about the PCC funds for prevention of crime. And that would seem a legitimate application to those funds. I don't think they're big enough to cover all the taxi drivers though, but I do think it's worth exploring with CCVS if we might be able to get some funding for the wheelchair vehicles. I know that Yvonne will hate me if I say this, but I just would quite like to have a taxi trades forum discussion meeting where we could talk about this and also get some advice from the more financially gifted officers and from CCVS about alternative funding. I know that the council hasn't got the money to pay for this. I do think we might be able to manage a short-term interest-free loan if legally we can do so, but I have no idea whether we hold the requisite consumer credit licence and also what the implementation cost scheme would be. And although I have been through the CCVS grant training, I haven't been through it recently enough to say definitively what grants might be available. Although I suspect it would probably only be for the wheelchair-enabled vehicles. Thank you.
I'll just come back and endorse what Councillor Bennett said, and also emphasise that we know that the costs for the disability taxis are higher than for the saloon taxis, but we also know, and any good sense tells us, that persons with a disability are at the greatest risk of all our residents, and therefore if there were to be any focus on some subsidy or some mechanism for ensuring that there could be funds that could be directed towards this CCTV, it really should be the disability taxis that are the first in the queue in my submission.
I'll try and take some of those points. So just going back to your point, Councillor Scutt, this policy was agreed in principle back in 2017. So this committee has already agreed in principle to introduce the policy. It came back to committee in March 2020. It then came back to committee in March 2022. So it has been discussed at a number of occasions. The cost has been discussed, and officers have never been asked to go away and start looking at other costings or other avenues of costing. So that piece of work has never been done, but the costs have always been in the committee reports around that. It is raised at the Taxi Trade Forum. Each quarter that we have a Taxi Trade Forum that members are invited to listen to what the trade has to say. So that's the position we're in at the moment, that it has been agreed in principle. This committee wanted the CCT to be installed only for safety measures for both the passenger and the driver. Never been asked to look at other funding arrangements until today.
Other questions from members? Sam?
Sorry. A couple of other things. Essentially, I'm just going to go back to the procurement issues problem, because I know there have been procurement issues in the past. And I'm just worried that if we suddenly implement this policy and all the taxi drivers need to find CCTV in a short space of time, that's going to cause further procurement issues to come up. So is there any way we can kind of have a sort of minor review clause that kind of says if there are significant cost increases, we look at this again, look at extending the date or something? Is that something that we can look at? And then I'm also just curious to hear, I'm not sure, Yvonne, or whether it's a matter for Paul, but about the implications of whether we could have CCTV that can be turned off when the vehicle isn't in use. Well, when there aren't passengers in the vehicle, essentially. So either when the taxi driver is kind of sitting waiting for somebody, or indeed is using the taxi to, as someone said before, is go for the family shop or something. Is that something we can look at, or have we already looked at it?
This has been floating around for a long time. We have worked with our procurement colleagues in both the city and south. It's been through a legal process. We've had a number of different solutions to the specification. can we legally require it? So we've got to a position now where all legal have been informed, procurement have been informed, and this has now been signed off by both the legal and the procurement teams. We can switch on and off the audio, but the camera itself would remain on at all times. But again, the only time we would, and it's a 30-day rolling camera, and the only reason we would ever want to have a look at the filming or the footage is if we're trying to deal with an incident, and we would then only look at the timing of that incident at that point in time. Hence why the only data controllers would be the licensing authority and the police. However, the audio can be switched on and off with the panic button. So if the passenger or the driver wanted to record what was actually being said, that can be done, but the camera would remain on at all times.
Would it be possible to potentially reschedule or suspend the vote to another date pending further investigation into the potential funding options that are available, whether there are any or if there aren't, and then we'll be able to make a decision based on that information? Thank you.
I actually want to say that I endorse fully what Councillor Bird has said about the fact that we do need to put safety number one. And number two, I have to apologise to the licensing group and particularly to you that one of the difficulties is that we have new members on the council, and I'm a relatively new member, and therefore we should have paid more attention to the fact that in 2017, I should have paid more attention to the fact that in 2017 it was approved in principle. And I am reluctant to say that we should send the licensing group off to do research about possible funding. It would seem to me that the better approach is to adopt what Councillor Bird said, priority for the taxi drivers and for the passengers are number one, to approve both recommendations, but also to keep in mind that what it says is that it should be in a phased and manageable approach that's taken, so that if taxi drivers were having some particular difficulty, they could bring it back to the committee and say that this is the difficulty that they're having. But I think that we should go ahead with the policy. There is a period of phasing in, which does enable taxi drivers to discover that for themselves if there's possibility of supportive funding. And I mean, I'd be very willing myself to pursue with central government and with the relevant minister this issue of safety, and that the central government should be doing something and taking action in terms of proper support for taxis, for example, to be have CCTV installed. Thank you.
Very quick. I was just wondering, because I know that some of the public speakers mentioned the possibility of legal action depending on vote results. I'm just wondering if we can have Paul's input on that. Have Paul's, as the legal advisor's, input on that.
Sorry, I didn't use my microphone. What I said there, sorry Jennifer, what I said there was, are there any other questions from members? Then once we've got those, we'll ask for Yvonne's come back, and we will of course seek Paul's advice. He's here, so I think that's a very good idea. I've got some notes of my own, so if we can have Naomi, and then we're just about done.
Thank you, Chair. I believe Councillor Gilderdale also wishes to speak. My query is not so much about the legal position, about the practical position. I fully understand that as a disabled passenger, I am vulnerable. CCTV cameras in my taxi, but I also want there to be a taxi for me. And I feel the risk to me and to other disabled residents is more because we're left waiting on a street or unable to get a taxi, or may have to make our journey in a way that's not actually physically safe for us. And I am really concerned, and I'll be honest, frightened about the availability. We know we are down to 4 vehicles in Cambridge that can take a mobility scooter. An ordinary wheelchair-enabled vehicle can't, because they're so heavy. I think if we're looking at safety, we really have to balance the risks and the effects on the supplies. I am really sorry to go against the previous decision of the committee in 2017, but, you know, on other issues, we have to adapt to changing circumstances. I do also say to the public speakers that I'm also a self-employed person. I have insurance-like expenditure. I've never claimed on my insurance. I probably never will. But the reason I pay this without grumbling is because I know how devastating even a false claim against a business person can be. And if that CCTV protects you from one teenager, accusing you of misconduct because he hasn't got the fare to pay his taxi, then that's saving your career and saving your livelihood. And I know every expenditure is hard, but maybe you could think of it as part of your insurance costs.
Thank you. I was just very briefly going to point out that I don't know how many systems we're talking about here, 100, whatever. There'll be a lead time. It may be quite, we need to move fairly quickly. It may take some time to order up and fit a number of camera systems. This doesn't happen in a week, so just bear that in mind, everyone here. Thank you.
It's very clear that no one disagrees with the 2017 vote, that we all agree, and even you're saying that CCTV is a positive step. And I think, obviously, in the circumstances now with the cost of living and with the council's budget, it's not going to be easy for anyone to shoulder the cost. Is there any way, even if we vote this through today, for us to look at forms of funding in the future that can potentially subsidise the larger vehicles that will cost more potentially to fit CCTV? Whether we can start discussions with the PCC potentially, that's been suggested, or whether that's, if we vote it through today, that we can't. I'm kind of asking what the practicalities are about this, because I think it's very clear we all want to help if we can, but obviously we're constrained by the budget process, which has already gone through for this year. So I don't think it's possible to make budget bids at the moment. Or is there the potential to extend the period for when they're required to have it installed? So instead of the 1st of April 2023, we can have a later date, maybe giving them more time, obviously during this period of instability, where they could potentially get the funds to be able to source that.
I mean, we can go back and explore funding opportunities, but as we've all said, I think central government, I think we're still asking for a taxi commissioning report since 2010, so it's very unlikely we would be successful going to central government. I think the only option would be to go to the PCC and the Safety Community Partnership, but again, funds are just short wherever we look at the moment. But I would be happy to go away and explore, but I wouldn't hold up much hope that there's internal funding available for this. And I just think from my point of view as a licensing authority, safety is the most important thing for our travelling public and our drivers. And I think we've got to be very mindful of that, and we need to be mindful that this policy has been around for a long time now. And my concern is that we are still getting incidents from members of the public, and as Appendix A states, you know, we've got an increase, a number of complaints coming through. I've had to do a number of emergency revocations. If we had CCTV, that would have helped make the decision a little bit easier. So I just want you to be mindful of the history around this policy and the current, and I absolutely get the current situation around costings.
Sorry, gentlemen, you had your say at the start, so you're here as observers now. So, Paul, have you anything to add? We'd like to hear from you.
Nothing to. Good morning, everyone. Nothing to add in particular. Clearly, the licensing team have done their work and research with regard to data protection. You've got to, as you well know, you've got to balance up what the priorities are, and in germane within taxis, the priority has always been the protection of the travelling public. Unless there's any specific questions.
Did you have a specific question for Paul? I'll let you lead on that.
I did, yes. Essentially, Paul, did you hear at the very start of the meeting when the public speakers were making contributions? Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, you can, sorry, just because you're leaning forward. There was discussion about sort of if we went ahead with the pursuance of legal action in some capacity based on, I'm not actually sure what the basis for that was, but I'm just wondering if you could respond to that in particular.
It was a comment that was made. It's difficult to advise until such time as the detail of any potential legal action is seen. By instant reaction is it could well be a judicial review, but without being disrespectful to the comment that was made, at present it is a two-word phrase.
Any other questions for the legal? No? Okay, thank you. What I'm going to do right now is we've exhausted our questions. I'll say I'll do something unusual, but it is me, so it's probably not unusual. Gentlemen, I'm going to give you a further 3 minutes for one of you to, after what you've heard, so you do get another say. What I'm trying to avoid is just a ping-pong effect, because it's something that just doesn't take us anywhere. But Yvonne may well want to respond, but I'd quite like to do that if one of you would like to speak. Yeah.
I just want to make one more comment. So I've just been informed by Wangari, who wrote the report, that some of the companies do actually offer 0% interest finance. So yeah, I'm not being rude on my phone. It was just I was texting Wangari to see what other options we had. So some companies do offer 0% finance.
So if one of you would like to represent all of you just for 2-3 minutes, and if you want a couple of minutes to confer on that, what you want to say, that's fine. But I'm anxious. I mean, everybody here is on your side. You can see that everybody is. But I'm also anxious that you get a last word. So do you need some time to decide what you're going to say, or you're okay, you're ready to go? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. So we're not disagreeing. We're not saying we're against it. Obviously, we agree. We think it's for a safety aspect for the driver and for a customer. CCTV, is very good. We're arguing about the financial cost of it, which you all agree as well. So the other options I was thinking about was obviously we're paying yearly fees to the licensing committee. You could do something like that where you write that off, so we don't pay nothing for 2 years or 3 years or whatever you can, whatever you agree on, just to help. Also, the other...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you again. It's probably my hearing. But if you just go back and let's send, I heard the 2 or 3 years, but I didn't hear what you said before that.
Okay.
So you're making some important points. So I just want to make sure that everybody's got those.
Sorry, yeah. We agree with CCTV, we just don't agree with the costing. If each driver's paying something like, what, 500, something like that a year? Sort of, for the plate. If the council can not charge anything, so every year the drivers don't pay nothing for, say, 2 years or 3 years, that will help towards the costing of CCTV. Also, the other point was about this legislation that you're talking about and that you've spoken to relevant authorities, is that when you're, even though you're saying that a licensed taxi is not, it is a licensed taxi, and whether you have your family in there or not, continuous recording, without the on and off button, has been taken to court previously with other councils, and it's not, it's considered unlawful. That's one point to consider. And also, the drivers, we should be able to, if we're paying for it, we should have full access. I'm not saying we can delete anything, but we should be able to access it. For example, if there's an accident, if I'm going to go back to the council, to Yvonne, and I'm going to say, sorry, there was an accident at this time, can I have a look? They're not going to have the time to go back and keep giving us that footage so that we can give it to the insurance company. So I think I think that should be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Last word to Yvonne then on those points.
Okay, so the fees that we set for licensing are a self-funding fee. So if we were to subsidise it through the fees, that would then have to come out of the general fund again. So where we charge the fees for a licence, so Hackney Carriage is £195 a year, that the council would have to find that money from elsewhere, basically, because we have to show that we are not making a profit and we're not covering our losses, and that is a legal requirement through the licensing regime. The purpose of a CCTV, as we've all said, it's around the safety. It's not trying to identify if an accident's happened or not happened. It is around the safety. As I said before, it has to remain on at all times, but we would only look at the clippage of the incident at the time it happened or after the time it happened. So we would only ever view possibly a couple of minutes, or however long the incident has taken to take place. And that is why for CCTV, the data controllers can only be the police or the licensing authority. I think covered all the points.
Okay, thank you. We're nearly done now, Naomi. We've sort of...
I think it might be a helpful point. Under GDPR, you do have a right to request information from the data controller. So you could get any footage. You could make a request for any footage you wanted in that way. And there are quite clear rights under the GDPR legislation which govern that. So your data would not be lost just because you're not the data controller. Thank you.
Fair point. Members, obviously, we are of one mind. I think we're all of one mind in here. Safety is paramount, it always is. And I would make a suggestion that we do need to go with the recommendations. That is my view. But bearing in mind everything that the members of the Taxi Forum have said, and I would like to add another recommendation that officers explore the possibility of subsidy or zero loan scheme, looking into PCC fund, the safety partnership, and indeed the council's finances themselves. It's not for me to comment on the status of any of those aforementioned funds, but I don't think it's beyond reason to ask for those and to see what comes up. I'm especially concerned with the provision of disabled use taxis. because as we've had already a discussion very recently that they're very hard to get. We had that discussion before this meeting, and we've had it on other occasions. And one of the things that's in my mind, of course, as it will be in yours, is that if the cost of extra cameras, and I hadn't realised how many would be required, if that incentive takes off the road, is likely to take off the road disabled vehicles or vehicles that are enabled to take wheelchairs, then that's going to be a bit self-defeating for the city and for people that really need it. So I think it is important to look into this funding. It's not my place to say whether that funding will be available, whether it's possible. That's not for me to say. But what we can say is at 2.3, for officers to explore the possibility of subsidies, perhaps zero loan, PCC funding, community safety partnership, or indeed the council funds themselves. I would like to add that in if everybody's happy with that. Thank you, Councillor.
I'll second it, yeah.
And with that proviso, are members happy to go to the vote for these recommendations, adding in 2.3? In that case, then, can I see all those, what we will do, I think we need some sort of timescale for 2.3 as well. There's no point in coming back in 2027 with an answer. So I would like to see some sort of timescale on that. And again, it's not really for me to say, because I don't know how long that sort of investigation would take. But I would certainly like to see some come back before the next meeting. Jerry?
Yeah, I would suggest give it 6 months, because it's going to take a while to find all the funding and the way things are with staff and stuff. So.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see something. I think the next meeting is February, isn't it? January, okay. I think I'd like to see some progress on it. Let's put it that way. We haven't got an answer what the progress is by the January meeting of where we're going with this, even if that isn't positive at that moment. But if we have some come back, some report back by January to see where we stand with those inquiries, which is all they are.
What about we combine both what Councillor Bird has said and Councillor McPherson to say that there be a limit of 6 months, but that we have an update each meeting before the 6 months, because we do need to bring it to an end, don't we, sometime, as Councillor Bird said.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, on the basis of that, we can take it 2.1, 2.2 and 2.3 separately, or we can take it all on block. What is your preference? Happy to take it on block? Okay, in that case then, all those in favour of those 3 recommendations? Thank you very much. It's going to go there. Is there anybody against? And abstentions to that? Oh, yeah, she did vote.
See, it must have been behind them.
Yeah. Okay. So 1 abstention. So, gentlemen, I think your presentation is well made, and what you've achieved here may not be exactly what you needed to, but we needed to find a balance. What we've certainly done is enabled us to go forward and look at further possibilities of help with this. And I do get what the Environmental Health Manager has been saying. It's very difficult. Officers have now got to look at funding. It hasn't been brought to our attention to this level before. And I guess there's 2 things to that. Perhaps with so many new members as well, and the world situation has changed since 2017 significantly for all of us. So I think whilst I do apologise to officers and to them for the work they've done and given them this extra piece of work, I think members are happy with that presentation, and I think at least you've gone away with something. As I assure you, each one of these meetings, I've not chaired many so far, but I've been on licensing a long time, and each time I think I've said to you, we are on your side. I believe I've said that in each meeting. So let's see where that takes us. And I thank you for your time and your effort, and the officers, and say my apologies once more for giving them a little bit more work than they would have expected. Thank you, members. That concludes the meeting for today.